My name is Emily Vito, and I am the Assistant Director of Development with Film at Lincoln Center. Along with our friends at Focus Features, we are thrilled to present Limbo, directed by Ben Sharrock and starring Amir El-Masry and Vikash Bhai. We're also happy to have the directors and stars for a conversation following tonight's screening, moderated by Frank DiLella, host of On Stage on Spectrum News NY1. Before we get started, we'd like to thank American Airlines, the official airline of Film at Lincoln Center. I'd also like to thank you for your support of Film at Lincoln Center. We are so excited to present Azazel Jacobs' French Exit and Andrei Tarkovsky's Mirror, with screenings available now in the Eleanor Bunin Monroe Film Center. I also hope you'll join us for our 50th anniversary of New Directors, New Films, with screenings both online and in theaters from April 28th through May 8th. Visit newdirectors.org for tickets and more information. And now, please enjoy Limbo and stay tuned for our conversation with Ben, Amir, and Vikash following the film.
Hey guys, Frank DiLella from New York One News here, and I'm thrilled to be chatting with the writer and director of Limbo, Ben Sharrock, along with his stars, Amir El-Masry and Vikash Bhai. Hello, gentlemen. How are you all doing?
Really well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Ben, I want to start with you. Where did this story come from? Where did Limbo come from?
It's something that stems back really over 10 years to my time living in Damascus, which was just the year before the civil war started. And then it's sort of a number of different things sort of in the years that followed that kind of led me to making this film. So kind of flash forward to the point that I kind of went into filmmaking and went into film school. I ended up working with an NGO in the Sahrawi refugee camps in southern Algeria. And I was staying with a family there, and we were working on a project that was specifically about identity and about how the label of being a refugee affects identity. And then flash forward again to the point where the refugee crisis became very prevalent in the media. I was also at that point still in touch with the friends that I'd made in Syria. And I was really struck by the representation of refugees, and what I found was this sort of process of dehumanization where we were experiencing on one side the demonizing of refugees, which is obviously dehumanizing, and on the other the pitying of refugees, which is dehumanizing. And also, you know, looking at refugees just as numbers and statistics. So the subject matter really attached itself to me, and I set off on this journey to write the screenplay and to try and approach the subject matter in a different way and humanize the refugee experience, and also to kind of use humor when approaching the subject. And yeah, I had a kind of a big list of things to avoid.
Well, we'll get into some of the points you just brought up, but thank you for sharing that. Amir, you played the central character of Omar. What was your reaction when you got this script?
Honestly, I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a story that depicts talks about the refugee crisis, but has someone who has experienced that in the forefront of the story. Ben makes Omar, like you said, he has his own agency. He, everything kind of, we follow him throughout the story. And, more often than not in previous depictions, I've seen that there's like a Western savior character that shows the refugee a better way of life. But with this story, we're constantly reminded of how beautiful Syria was. And we're introduced to its music, its food, the culture, even the little jokes. So you really get an essence of it. And Omar wouldn't want to be anywhere else but home. Mm-hmm. And we're constantly told that in the film, which I absolutely love, because there is in some areas people negatively react to people coming over because they don't understand their plight. They think they just they want to like just take up space or whatever, but no, they have no choice. And that's what's beautifully portrayed in the film.
Vikash, you played Farhad, and I understand you did a deep dive into Afghan culture. to create this character for the screen. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. Production were really great at kind of providing resources to be able to access, I guess, a multitude of avenues of being able to create this world. I'm not an Afghan man myself, so meeting with the Afghan Society in London, who, you know, they were just incredibly invaluable with their own experiences and telling me a lot about the kind of the journeys that some of them who had come over here as asylum seekers, the kind of journeys they'd made, their experiences, what life was like back home, some of the restrictions that might have been in place because of various other infighting that might have been going on, or you know, the beauty of some of the food, and introducing me to like different types of Afghan cuisine, which I would then go and seek out. You know, like, it sounds mad, like in that kind of, you know, method-y sort of way, but I just wanted to embrace as much of it as possible, in a way so that I knew what was being left behind, what you're really having to give up. Because that's, you know, whilst we don't see the trauma of that Farhad, that's still got to be carried, because you know, he's the kind of guy that has the absolute faith in things turning out for the best, but he still is carrying his own trauma. So yeah, I was very lucky to have access to a lot of stuff to be able to do that.
And speaking of doing deep dive, Amir, I understand you actually connected with refugees in London in preparation for this role as well.
We connected with refugees in Scotland. We were all working with a Syrian men's group, but prior to that, also I had friends who have gone through similar experiences, who are Syrian, friends of mine that I've known for a couple of years, and so yeah, I was well informed even from previous jobs I've done as well. A job I did called The State and Daniel. So the research was pretty much there. But what the feelings involved and the personal accounts were really precious to me, because you don't really, whatever we felt on set, to have the first-hand account from them, is integral to kind of getting stuck into the mental zone of Omar.
Amir, was there one thing in particular that someone shared with you that helped shape or form your character of Omar?
There was one particular guy who told me about his journey from Egypt. He's a Syrian refugee who went to Egypt first, and he was I believe he was a doctor, but he started his own kind of cobbler stall in Egypt, but it kept getting knocked down and building it back up again, and he kept getting knocked down, and then he'd left his family, and he eventually made it to Scotland via the UN program. But just to see him and listen to him tell that story while smiling just showed the amount of strength that he possesses, and the fact that he's able to just look back and just almost laugh about his plight was very interesting, and it was reflective of the culture itself, the idea that we laugh at our own mishaps and our own misfortunes. And I think that was really important to carry that bit of energy into Omar as well.
Amazing. Ben, you spoke briefly about some of your past experiences and how they informed this project of Limbo. As you mentioned, you spent time where you shot, I believe, a short film in a refugee camp in Algeria. Talk about that experience and how you applied that to Limbo and what you learned from that.
Yeah, I mean, I think during that time in the refugee camps in Algeria, it was we were there working with this NGO, but we were also developing this short film. And we were never able to make the short film. So this was when I was back in film school, and basically we came back, and then the film school wouldn't let us go back out there because we couldn't get the insurance to make the film, because Al Qaeda were operating in the area. So it was a kind of this sort of desire to make this film about the subject matter, really stuck with me. So then it was another, I think probably 5 years later, or a few years later, when I kind of embarked on the journey to start writing Limbo. But what really kind of stuck out to me during my time in the refugee camps was, I was living with a family there, and we just, for a start, we just had so much in common with the people there, regardless of the cultural differences, and regardless of their circumstances versus my circumstances, but also that people didn't see themselves as refugees. I mean, in these camps, there's 200,000 people living in the middle of the desert that have been displaced, and they've been there for decades. But the fact that they're refugees has nothing to do with their identity. So we went into a school. One of the things we did, we went to a school and we asked the children to draw pictures of themselves, of how they see themselves and how they see their families. And the pictures that they came up with, the drawings that they came up with, had nothing to do with them being in a refugee camp or anything that was attached to them being refugees. Most of them actually drew themselves as superheroes, as I think many children would do here or over in New York or wherever you are in the world.
That's amazing. I need to point out this film is also very funny. With what the quote-unquote subject matter is, the framing device of this film is one thing, but it is funny. Can you talk about finding the humor amidst what most would probably think to be something that's rather dark?
I mean, I think that kind of tonal balance of the film was one of the things that was so challenging all the way throughout the process, from kind of writing the screenplay and kind of feeling that, responsibility and pressure to obviously do justice to this subject matter, but with this believing that kind of using humor would be this really kind of interesting approach to this subject matter that would allow people to access it in a different way through this film. So it was really a constant challenge to do that. But I think that one of the things was it's a particular type of humor. It's an absurdist humor, and a lot of that humor is actually kind of about looking at the Western characters and looking at how absurd they are. So we're kind of always on side with the refugees, and we're kind of experiencing the absurdity of their circumstances, and how Helga and Boris and the other characters are perceiving them, and how absurd that kind of othering is. And the other side of that is that a lot of those things are based on reality. So those cultural awareness classes are based on real cultural awareness classes that take place in various countries around Europe. And I came across classes that take place in Germany that are how to teach asylum seekers to flirt with German girls. And so there's just so much kind of inherent absurdity in kind of how we're viewing refugees and treating them. So I think, it's kind of, we're always on the side of Omar and Farhad and the other guys.
There's definitely some material there to dive into, gents. And then for the actors, just talk about getting that script in. And I mean, were you laughing immediately, or just kind of playing with that comedy, if you will?
Yeah, definitely. I've never read a script where I've laughed and cried at the same time. I think it is essential to tell this story in that way. It draws the audience closer, especially an audience that might be alien to this subject matter. Yeah, but from my point of view, you know, I had to play it straight constantly. I can't play to the humor so much.
And I think that's what makes it funny, you know, watching the Westerners, if you will, versus, you know, watching it through your eyes.
Yeah, no, exactly. But stylistically, you know, it was important to get the positioning right. And I think from the landscape itself, you find the humor on where we're positioned within that frame as well. So yeah, we were just allowed to kind of be in the space, and let all the other elements kind of shape the humor of the scene.
Vikash, what was life like on set? Because obviously you're in a very specific area with this film.
Yeah, it would vary day to day, you know, because we had all sorts of situations weather-wise that we were dealing with. So, you know, it was almost like 5 seasons in a day. From you know, you'd have sleet one minute, it'd be raining the next, and so we'd have to work really quick. And you know, thankfully Ben has built such a great team, both behind the camera but also on camera, so that whatever we were going through, we were in the trenches together, and we had the goal in sight, and we were all marching towards it. Which, I mean, it was such an amazing, wonderful adventure and experience. It's my hands down favorite filmmaking experience to date. You know, so if that answers your question, that's what it was like, man. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can only imagine what the weather gods were doing while you guys were trying to film this. In doing my research, I understand for some folks it made it a little difficult for them to show up where you guys were filming. Amir, just talk about, you know, your situation where you stayed, and kind of like that peacefulness of going home at night and just, you know, kind of decompressing and then starting the day anew.
Yeah, I mean, in that sense, I was lucky, because no matter what, like, the elements through that day with the rain and sleet and the gale force winds, I was lucky enough to go home and rest. I was staying in like a little kind of like a tree house up in the only area where there were planted trees, so I wouldn't get to hear the wind kind of pressing against the glass. But yeah, over there it's amazing. Honestly, the best night's sleep I've had. You know,
Except for when the mooses were screaming, right?
What's that?
The big mooses when they were yelling.
Oh yeah, I mean that. Yeah, I mean, I think, and was it mating season around that time?
It was.
Yeah,
it was.
Yeah, so yeah, you do hear the guttural
rutting season.
The rut, yeah,
right.
Yeah, and you hear their guttural calls to one another. You know, the hey girl, but like in their language.
You got all the elements.
Yeah.
But you know, Amir as well, I mean, you know, credit to him too, because he wouldn't get, you know, the shoot was incredibly difficult, you know, for everyone being out in those conditions, but Amir would actually have to go home at night and practice the oud. So he still had a lot of work every evening when we got to relax.
Which I didn't
get to relax. I never got time to relax. Actually, I'm not going to claim. I didn't either. But you know, some people did, but we didn't.
Yeah, no, honestly, yeah, we. But then, yeah, I would get jealous when I'd hear some people going to a place called the Dark Island. It was the only the only pub on the island. But yeah, it was you know, a month on the island of, you know, practicing on the piece which Khem Alemi composed. 50% of that was pulling my hair out and going, this isn't going to work. But yeah, we managed to get there in the end, because Ben kindly allowed that to be the last scene that we filmed.
Just talk about learning that. I mean, how long did it take you to ultimately perfect it? Because, you know, it's such a beautiful instrument. We get to see it throughout the film, you know, in moments, but then you have that moment at the end. How long did it take you to perfect it?
Well, we had 2 months, and Khem Alemi kind of taught me the basics.
Were you musical at all before? Were you?
I was, but nothing like this. This is a beast of itself. 11 strings. I was definitely foreign to the oud, and my knowledge of playing guitar was not useful at all. But yeah, I mean, Khiam kind of taught me the basics, and he gave me the shell of the piece, and he said, if you manage to get this down and you nail this part, everything else will fall into place. And yeah, I felt completely safe. I felt really, really safe having him and having another gent called Atab Haddad, who was our oud consultant there as well. Who yeah, so yeah, we managed to blag it in the end, for sure.
It was excellent. Ben, talk about incorporating some of the locals in the area into your film.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't have done this film without the locals. I mean, they were just incredible, and yeah, so valuable to what we were trying to do. So we had we used them as much as we possibly could. So we had locals that were working behind the camera, that were working in the crew. We had locals that were, location scouts as well. We had a lot of locals that were performing in the film as extras in some of the smaller roles, and and then fixers. So we used, we had one guy who was just incredible, and he had Donald, and he sort of had everything. So he had all of the sheep, he had the boat, he had the quad bikes, he had, he just had everything. And he would just help us out all the time. We'd be like, we need the boat at this jetty. Is that possible? And he would be like, oh, I don't know. It's quite dangerous to get it round there, because you've got to kind of go all the way around the island, but I'll do it for you. So, and they just did everything that they could to help us as well. So yeah, it was really, really special.
I mean, how exciting for them to have this film be done right in their backyard. Ben, just going back to the refugee experience, I understand that it was very important to you to kind of center on and shine a spotlight on the male refugee experience, correct?
Yeah. I mean, it was kind of a decision that was made kind of quite early on in the writing process, because there was really, the reason for that was because I felt like in kind of media representation, media depictions of refugees, it's really the single male refugee that is seen as the sort of biggest threat by the right-wing media. But the single male refugee is also the lowest priority asylum seekers. So it's much more difficult for single males to get refugee status. And then, yeah, further down the line, Amir mentioned a little bit, it's actually really interesting because we consulted with a group of single male Syrian refugees that actually meet once a week in Edinburgh and gather together. And that group, a lot of the members of that group ended up participating in the film. Some came out to the island, and one of them actually played Omar's father, or the image of Omar's father.
Amazing. To the close of our conversation, what do you want people to walk away with after they see this film? What's the message you want them to take away from this funny and poignant film? Amir. Or Vikash.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'd love for them to laugh and cry as we all have reading it and working on it, and then enjoy that, but also to see that there can be a sense of community and friendship in seemingly bleakest of times, and that can really get you through some really tough situations, because these friendships and it's the community in this film, I think, for me anyway, that kind of bind together.
Amazing. Amir.
I mean, it'll be hard to top that, but definitely to follow on from those sentiments, for sure. Even through the most dire circumstances, you can find some light, and I think that speaks universally. I think the themes in this film will transcend any culture. The idea of being a fish out of water, or losing your identity and having to regain that in some way, shape, or form. We've all gone through it in some way in the past 2 years. So I hope in some way they can connect to that on that level.
Amazing.
Ben? Yeah. And I mean, for me, I think one of the things is that I really kind of like the idea that the kind of broad refugee crisis and refugees have been kind of, represented as just numbers and statistics. And, so the idea that people will spend an hour and a half or an hour and 40 minutes in the cinema and feel a connection with these people on screen, with these characters, and feel close to them, and but also kind of find parts of themselves in them and relate to them. So that's one side of it, but also, as Amir said, there is a universality to this. So it's kind of, it's also, I wanted to make a film about the refugee crisis, but also without it being about refugees in a way. It's just about human beings, and it's about being human. And there's so many things in this film which is about friendships and family and identity and longing and existentialism. So all of those things, no matter kind of what your circumstances or where you are in the world, we can all relate to those things.
Incredible. Thank you, Ben, Amir, Vikash. You can catch Limbo in theaters this Friday.